He asked me to do her makeup. His mistress. In my own home. Told me to make her beautiful for him while I smiled and pretended my heart wasn't breaking into a million pieces. But what he didn't know was that while I was applying her lipstick, I was planning his downfall. And honey, let me tell you, revenge looks better than any makeup I've ever done. If you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, stay with me. Because this story is about to show you that the woman they underestimate is the most dangerous woman in the room. My name is Ruby, and this is how I went from broken housewife to the woman who brought down a billionaire empire. You're going to want to hear every single word of this. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Sometimes I look back at the person I used to be and I barely recognize her. My name is Ruby, and this is the story of how I lost myself and then found something even stronger in the ruins of my broken marriage. Let me take you back to where it all started. 10 years ago, I was living in Los Angeles, working as a makeup artist with dreams that felt bigger than the sky. I had just finished beauty school at the top of my class, and I was grinding every single day. 3 different jobs, barely sleeping, living in a tiny apartment in East LA that I shared with 2 roommates. But I was happy. I had this fire inside me, This belief that one day I would open my own beauty salon, a place where women could come and feel beautiful, feel seen, feel like they mattered. My mom used to watch me practice new techniques on her face, and she would smile and say, "Baby girl, you have magic in your hands. You make people shine from the inside out." And I believed her with my whole heart. I was working at this small makeup studio in West Hollywood, putting in 16-hour days, saving every dollar I could. My plan was clear. In 2 years, I would have enough money to lease a small space and start my own business. I had notebooks filled with ideas, color schemes for the walls, names for my salon, everything. I lived and breathed that dream. That's where I met him, Richard Blackwell. He walked into the studio on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, looking like he owned the entire city. Most of our clients were struggling actors and college students trying to look good for auditions. So when this man in a $5,000 suit walked through the door, everyone noticed. He was there for a business headshot session, and he needed someone to do his makeup. I remember my hands were shaking a little because I could tell this man was important. He had that energy, Like the air moved differently around him. When I finished his makeup, he looked at himself in the mirror and smiled. It wasn't a fake smile. It was real, like I had somehow made him see himself in a new way. "You're incredibly talented," he said to me. And the way he said it, like he really meant it, made my heart skip a beat. 3 weeks later, Richard was coming to the studio twice a week. He would book sessions for business meetings, for events, always requesting me specifically. He would ask me questions about my techniques, my inspiration, my goals. For the first time in my life, someone with real power and real money was taking my dreams seriously. When he finally asked me out for coffee, I felt like I was in a movie. This successful man, this tech billionaire who had built companies from nothing, wanted to know about me, about my life, about what I wanted for my future. Our first real date was at this expensive restaurant in Beverly Hills. I was so nervous I could barely eat. But Richard made me feel comfortable. He told me to order whatever I wanted. He listened when I talked about my plans for my salon. He didn't look at his phone once. He was completely present, completely focused on me. "You're wasting your talent working for someone else," he told me over dessert. "You should be running your own empire. You should be the boss, not the employee." 6 months into our relationship, Richard started talking about how I could quit my jobs and focus completely on building my business. He said he would invest in me, give me the money to open my salon right away. No more waiting, no more struggling. All I had to do was trust him and let him take care of me while I built my dream. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs that I missed because I was so caught up in the fairy tale. The way he always had to choose where we went on dates. How he would suggest what I should wear to his business events, saying he knew what looked best on me. The little comments about my friends from beauty school, how he thought they were holding me back, filling my head with small dreams when I was meant for something bigger. But when you're in love, you don't see red flags. You see excuses. You see reasons. You see a man who cares about you so much that he just wants the best for you. Richard proposed after only 7 months together. He did it at his mansion in the Hollywood Hills, this massive house with a view of the entire city. The ring was so beautiful it made me cry. The view was breathtaking. And I was so swept up in the moment that I never stopped to ask myself if this was really what I wanted, or if I was just saying yes to the dream he was selling me. The wedding was like something out of a magazine. Richard hired the best wedding planner in Los Angeles, booked the most exclusive venue in Malibu, flew in flowers from around the world. Every time I tried to suggest something personal, something that felt like us, Richard would smile and pat my hand like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. "Darling," he would say, "this wedding is going to be in all the magazines. Everything has to be perfect. Perfect." That word would echo in my head for the next 10 years, haunting me like a ghost. After the honeymoon in Paris, I moved into Richard's world completely. The mansion was stunning, with a makeup studio that most professionals would dream about. But it felt cold. It felt like a beautiful cage, and I was the bird inside it, slowly forgetting how to fly. Richard suggested I take some time to settle into married life before opening my salon. Just a few months, he said, so we could enjoy being newlyweds. Those few months turned into a year. Then 2 years. Then 5. Every single time I brought up my salon, Richard had a reason why now wasn't the right time. The economy was unstable. He had found a better location, but we needed to wait. He wanted to make sure I had enough money to do it properly, to do it big, not just some small neighborhood shop. Meanwhile, I started doing makeup for his business partners. Just occasionally at first. Small gatherings at the house, events for his company. Richard was so proud of me during these times, telling everyone about his incredibly talented wife. I felt useful. I felt like I was contributing to our success as a couple. But slowly, so slowly that I didn't even notice it happening, those events became my whole life. Instead of building my own business, I was essentially working for free as Richard's personal makeup artist and event coordinator. When I mentioned feeling like an unpaid employee, Richard would remind me that I was building our empire, our future, and that my contributions were priceless even if they weren't traditional. "Besides," he would say, "why do you need your own salon when you have all this? All this." A beautiful prison with designer furniture and an ocean view. By year 3 of our marriage, I had stopped talking about my salon altogether. The notebooks with all my dreams and plans were packed away in a closet somewhere, buried under boxes of things I no longer used. I had become someone I didn't recognize. The perfect billionaire's wife. Beautiful on the outside, empty on the inside. I knew exactly how Richard liked everything. His coffee had to be a specific temperature. His shirts had to be pressed in a particular way. When we had guests, I knew which clients preferred champagne and which preferred whiskey. I knew how to smile at the right moments, how to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, how to make myself invisible when Richard needed to talk business and visible when he needed to show off his beautiful wife. The loneliness was the hardest part to bear. I was surrounded by luxury, living in a house that most people only see in movies, but inside I felt like I was starving. Starving for real friendship, for purpose, for the dreams I used to have. My friends from beauty school had all moved forward with their lives. Some opened their own small studios. Others were working at high-end salons, building their careers, making names for themselves. When they would invite me to their events, their shop openings, their birthday parties, Richard always had a conflict. A business dinner, a charity gala, a meeting with investors. Something that required me to be by his side as his wife. "You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" he would say. "These people are counting on us. Your friends will understand." Slowly, the invitations stopped coming. My old friends probably thought I had become too fancy for them, too good for my old life. They had no idea that I was disappearing, piece by piece, day by day, becoming a shadow of the woman I used to be. The affairs started around year 5. I didn't have proof at first, just this feeling in my gut that something had changed. There were signs everywhere once I started paying attention. Lipstick stains on his collar in shades I would never wear. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Late nights at the office that became later and more frequent. Richard had always been a workaholic, building his tech companies, always chasing the next big deal. So at first, it was easy to make excuses for him. He's just stressed. He's just busy. He's just focused on providing for us. But then I started finding things. Credit card statements with charges at jewelry stores for pieces I never received. Restaurant bills for romantic dinners at places we had never been together. Hotel charges in cities where Richard claimed to be meeting with investors alone. When I finally got the courage to confront him about it, I expected denial. I expected lies. But Richard didn't even try to hide it. He just looked at me with this expression of annoyance, like I was interrupting something important with something trivial. "Ruby," he said, his voice cold and matter-of-fact. "What did you expect? You've let yourself go. You're not the woman I married anymore." Let myself go. I was 32 years old. I still worked out 5 days a week. I still did my makeup perfectly every single day. I still wore the designer clothes he bought me. But in Richard's eyes, I had become boring. Predictable. Not enough. "I've given you everything," he continued, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. "A beautiful home. Financial security. A lifestyle that most women would die for. If you're not happy, maybe you should think about being more grateful instead of more suspicious." That night, I lay in our king-sized bed, listening to Richard's peaceful breathing next to me, and I realized that I had become a stranger to myself. The ambitious makeup artist who once dreamed of changing the world one face at a time had been replaced by a woman who couldn't even change her own life. But you know what? Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you can start climbing back up. And my rock bottom was coming faster than I ever could have imagined. The moment that truly broke me, the moment that woke up something fierce and unstoppable inside me, happened on a Thursday evening in September. Richard came home earlier than usual, which should have been my first warning sign. He had this strange energy about him, like someone who was about to do something cruel and was enjoying the anticipation. "Ruby," he said, loosening his tie as he walked through the door, "I need you to prepare dinner tomorrow night. Something special." I had been cooking special dinners for his business associates for years, so this request should have been normal. But something in his voice made my stomach turn. "How many people?" I asked, already thinking about what I could prepare. "Just 3, he said, and the smile on his face made my blood run cold. "Me, you, and Jessica from the marketing department." Jessica from the marketing department. I knew exactly who Jessica was. 28 years old, long red hair, always wearing tight dresses to company events. I had seen the way she looked at Richard, the way she would touch his arm when she laughed, the way she acted like I didn't exist when I stood right next to him. Why would Jessica be coming to our home for dinner? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. Richard had this look on his face, this satisfied, cruel expression that I had seen before when he closed a big business deal or fired an employee who had disappointed him. "She's been working on some important projects with me," he said, the lies sliding off his tongue so easily. "I want to discuss them in a more relaxed environment, away from the office." In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't heartbreak. I had already cried all my tears during the lonely nights when Richard came home smelling like someone else's perfume. It wasn't even surprise. I had known about his affairs for months. What died inside me that night was the last piece of the woman who had been willing to accept disrespect in exchange for security. This man wanted me to cook dinner for his mistress. In my home. At my table. Using my skills to create a romantic atmosphere for him and the woman he was sleeping with behind my back. He wanted me to smile and serve them both. To play the role of the obedient, helpful wife while he paraded his affair right in front of my face. The audacity was breathtaking. The cruelty was unbelievable. And in that moment, I realized that Richard saw me as so completely broken, so thoroughly defeated, that he actually believed I would do it. He was counting on my silence, my compliance, my complete submission to his will. But instead of screaming, instead of crying, instead of giving him the dramatic reaction he probably expected and maybe even wanted, I smiled. A real smile. Perhaps the first genuine smile I had given him in years. "Of course, honey," I said, my voice sweet and calm. "What would you like me to prepare?" Richard looked surprised by how easily I agreed, but he was pleased. He probably thought he had finally succeeded in breaking me completely, in turning me into the perfect, spineless wife who would accept anything. He had no idea that behind my smile, my mind was already working, already planning, already 3 steps ahead of him. He had just made a fatal mistake. He had pushed me past my breaking point. But instead of breaking, I had transformed. The invisible wife he had created was about to become his worst nightmare. The next morning, I woke up with more clarity than I had felt in years. While Richard was in the shower, probably thinking about his upcoming romantic dinner with Jessica, I made a phone call that would change everything. "Daniel, it's Ruby. Remember what we talked about last month?" "I'm ready." Daniel Torres had been Richard's business partner until they had a falling out 8 months earlier. Richard had betrayed him on a major tech deal, stealing credit for Daniel's work and cutting him out of millions of dollars in profits. When Daniel had approached me at a charity event a few weeks back, he had been looking for information about Richard's business practices. Specifically, some irregularities he had noticed in their shared accounts before their partnership ended badly. "What made you change your mind?" Daniel asked, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. "He's bringing her here," I said simply. "To our home." Daniel understood immediately. He had been married once too, before his ex-wife left him for someone wealthier. He knew what betrayal felt like. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Everything you know about his hidden accounts, his shell companies, and those investors he's been lying to about the San Diego project." Over the next several hours, Daniel and I began putting together the full picture of Richard's financial crimes. You see, what I had learned during my years as the invisible wife was that powerful men get careless when they think nobody is watching. They have conversations in front of you like you're a piece of furniture. They leave important documents lying around because they assume you're too focused on household things to pay attention to business matters. But I had been paying attention. For years, I had been collecting information without even realizing it was important. Photos of documents Richard left on his home office desk. Details about meetings he would discuss over dinner, thinking I wasn't really listening. Recordings of phone conversations he would take in front of me because he assumed I was too busy cooking to care about his business. Richard had been stealing money from his investors for years, hiding assets in offshore accounts, falsifying documents to cover his tracks. The San Diego Tech campus project that had made him hundreds of millions of dollars was built on lies, bribes, and fake financial reports. He had been paying off city officials, lying to investors about development costs, and keeping the difference for himself. Daniel had suspected some of this during their partnership, but he never had enough proof to take action. Together, we began building a case that would bring down Richard's entire empire. That afternoon, I also reached out to Patricia Moore, a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving wealthy husbands and had a reputation for absolutely destroying unfaithful men in court. Patricia took one look at the evidence I had already gathered and smiled like someone who had just been handed a gift. "Honey," she said, leaning back in her chair, "by the time we're done with Richard Blackwell, he won't be able to afford a studio apartment in the valley, let alone keep a mistress in a penthouse." The plan we developed was simple but devastating. We would expose Richard's crimes at the exact same time we served him with divorce papers. This way, he would be too busy fighting criminal charges to hide assets from the divorce proceedings. His lawyers would be scrambling to keep him out of prison, not fighting over who got the house. But I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted Richard to feel the same humiliation he had made me feel. I wanted him to understand what it was like to be betrayed by someone you trusted, to be made invisible, to be treated like you didn't matter. I decided to throw one last dinner party. But first, I had to get through the evening with Jessica. And let me tell you, that was going to be the performance of my lifetime. The day of the dinner, I spent hours in my kitchen preparing what I knew would be Richard and Jessica's last meal together as a happy couple. I made everything from scratch. A beautiful roasted chicken with herbs from my garden. Roasted vegetables that looked like they belonged in a magazine. A chocolate dessert that took 4 hours to prepare perfectly. As I cooked, I thought about all the dreams I had given up. All the times I had swallowed my pride to keep peace in this house. All the moments I had made myself smaller so Richard could feel bigger. I thought about the salon I never opened, the friends I had lost, the woman I used to be before Richard convinced me I needed to be someone quieter, more convenient, more controllable. When the doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp, I smoothed down my black dress. I had chosen it deliberately, like I was already mourning my marriage. I walked to the door with my head held high. Jessica stood there in a tight red dress that left very little to the imagination, holding a bottle of wine like she was arriving at a friend's house instead of her lover's home. Up close, she was even younger than I thought, with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never having been truly challenged by life. "You must be Ruby," she said with a fake smile. "Richard's told me so much about you." "I bet he has," I thought. But what came out of my mouth was, "Please come in. Dinner is almost ready." The three of us sat at my dining room table. The same table Richard and I had picked out together during our second year of marriage when we still pretended to be partners. I watched these two people flirt like I wasn't even there. Jessica complimented the food while touching Richard's hand. She laughed at his jokes while leaning so close that anyone could see what was happening. Richard poured wine and whispered things in her ear that made her giggle like a teenager. And I sat there, playing the perfect hostess, refilling glasses and clearing plates like a servant in my own home. "This chicken is incredible," Jessica said at one point, looking directly at me with what I'm sure she thought was sincerity. "Richard said you were talented, but this is restaurant quality." "Thank you," I replied, taking a sip of wine to keep from saying what I really wanted to say. "Maybe you could teach me some recipes sometime," she continued, her hand still on Richard's arm. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was planning to replace me entirely. In her mind, I was already gone. She was just waiting for Richard to make it official. "Ruby makes the most amazing desserts too," Richard added, his hand resting on Jessica's thigh right in front of me. "You should try her chocolate soufflé sometime." The casual way he talked about our future interactions, like the three of us were going to be some kind of happy family, made my blood boil. But I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. "I'd be happy to share recipes," I said, "because I am nothing if not a gracious hostess, even when I'm planning someone's destruction." After dinner, I served dessert and coffee while Richard and Jessica moved to the living room, sitting on the couch where Richard and I used to plan our future together. From the kitchen, I could hear Jessica's laughter, Richard's low voice, the sounds of two people who thought they were untouchable. When they finally left together, not even bothering to hide their relationship anymore, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes and empty wine glasses. And I made the phone calls that would change everything. First, I called Patricia to confirm that our plan was moving forward. Then I called Daniel to finalize the details of our evidence presentation. Finally, I called 3 journalists who specialized in exposing financial crimes among Los Angeles' elite. "This is Ruby Blackwell," I said to each of them. "I have a story you're going to want to hear." The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. While Richard continued his affair with Jessica, thinking I was too broken to do anything about it, I was working behind the scenes to dismantle everything he had built on lies. Patricia, my attorney, was a force of nature. She filed the divorce papers with the court, but we held off on serving them to Richard until everything else was in place. We wanted maximum impact. We wanted Richard to wake up one morning and find his entire world collapsing around him all at once. Daniel was working with federal investigators, walking them through years of financial documents that showed clear patterns of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. Every offshore account Richard thought was hidden. Every bribe he thought was secret. Every lie he told investors. It was all coming to light. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal at home. Smiling at Richard over breakfast. Asking him about his day. Sleeping in the same bed as a man I now saw clearly for what he really was. A criminal who had stolen my dreams, my identity, and 10 years of my life. But every time I wanted to scream at him, every time I wanted to confront him about Jessica or his crimes, or the way he had destroyed me piece by piece, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. Patience. Strategy. Justice. I also started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started dreaming again. Late at night, after Richard fell asleep, I would pull out those old notebooks from the closet. The ones with all my plans for my salon. And I started updating them, refining them, preparing for the life I would build after Richard was gone. Patricia had assured me that given the evidence of Richard's financial crimes and his infidelity, I would receive a substantial settlement. Enough to finally open my salon. Enough to start over. Enough to reclaim the dreams I had given up. The journalists I had contacted were doing their own investigation, verifying the information Daniel and I had provided. They were preparing articles that would expose Richard not just as a criminal, but as a fraud who had built his entire reputation on lies. And then came the day we had been planning for. Tuesday morning. Exactly 3 weeks after the dinner with Jessica. Richard left for work at his usual time, kissing me on the cheek like he always did, completely unaware that his life as he knew it was about to end. I watched him drive away in his Tesla, and I felt nothing. No sadness. No regret. Just a calm sense of purpose. At 9 a.m., federal agents arrived at Richard's office with a warrant for his arrest. The charges: wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, and falsifying financial documents. Daniel had provided them with everything they needed, and they had spent weeks building an airtight case. At 9:30 a.m., the first article went live online. Tech billionaire Richard Blackwell arrested for massive fraud scheme. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Social media. News websites. Television. At 10 a.m., A process server arrived at Richard's office and handed him divorce papers. By this time, he was already in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents, watching his career crumble. I wasn't there to see it happen, but Daniel called me and described everything. Richard's face when the agents arrived. His shock when he realized the scope of the charges against him. His panic when he understood that someone had been collecting evidence against him for weeks. He kept asking who gave us the information. Daniel told me. He still doesn't realize it was you. At noon, I held a press conference with Patricia by my side. I stood in front of cameras and reporters and told my story. Not the whole thing, but enough. I talked about being married to a man who had betrayed me, who had stolen from investors, who had built his empire on lies. I talked about finding the courage to do the right thing, even when it meant losing everything I thought I had. The media ate it up. By evening, I wasn't just Richard's betrayed wife. I was the whistleblower who had helped bring down a corrupt billionaire. I was the woman who had found her voice and used it to seek justice. My phone exploded with messages. Old friends from beauty school reaching out, telling me they had been thinking about me, asking if I was okay. Job offers from salons who wanted to hire me. Interview requests from magazines and television shows. But the message that meant the most came from my mom. "Baby girl," she wrote, "I always knew you had magic in your hands. But now I see you have steel in your spine too. I'm so proud of you." Richard's bail was set at $5 million. His assets were frozen pending the investigation. He couldn't make bail. He spent his first night in jail, probably for the first time in his life facing consequences for his actions. Jessica, I heard through mutual acquaintances, had immediately cut off all contact with Richard. The moment his empire started crumbling, she disappeared, probably already looking for the next wealthy man to attach herself to. She never loved him. She loved his money, his power, his status. And now that those things were gone, so was she. Over the next few months, Richard's case became one of the biggest financial crime stories in California. Investigators discovered even more crimes than we had initially found. More victims. More lies. More corruption. The trial was set for the following year, and legal experts were already predicting Richard would spend at least a decade in federal prison. The divorce was finalized quickly. Given Richard's criminal activity and his infidelity, Patricia was able to negotiate a settlement that gave me everything I was entitled to and more. The mansion, a substantial portion of his legitimate assets before they were seized. Enough money to ensure I would never have to depend on anyone ever again. 6 months after Richard's arrest, I was standing in front of a small building in Santa Monica, holding a set of keys in my hand and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, unfiltered joy. This was it. My salon. Finally. After 10 years of waiting, of dreaming, of being told to be patient, I was finally holding the keys to my own future. I had spent months designing every detail. The color scheme was warm and inviting, soft golds and deep purples. The chairs were comfortable and modern. The lighting was perfect for doing makeup. And on the wall behind the reception desk, I had painted a quote that had gotten me through the darkest days. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. I named the salon Phoenix Rising, because that's what I was doing. Rising from the ashes of my old life, reborn into someone stronger. Someone who would never again let anyone make her feel small or invisible or less than she was worth. The grand opening was everything I had dreamed of and more. My old friends from beauty school came, some of them traveling from other cities just to support me. My mom stood next to me as I cut the ribbon, tears streaming down her face. Daniel came too, along with Patricia, both of them proud of the role they played in helping me reclaim my life. Local news covered the opening, but not because of my connection to Richard. They covered it because of my story, a woman who had lost herself and found the courage to rebuild. Customers started booking appointments before we even officially opened. Women who had read about my story and wanted to support me. Women who saw themselves in my struggle and wanted to be part of my victory. On opening day, my first client was a young woman named Sarah. She was 24, fresh out of beauty school, full of dreams and ambitions. As I worked on her makeup, she told me about her plans to open her own salon someday. "Don't wait," I told her, looking directly into her eyes. "Don't let anyone convince you that your dreams should come second to theirs. Not a boyfriend, not a husband, not anyone. Your dreams matter. You matter." She smiled at me, and I saw in her eyes the same fire I used to have, the same determination that I had almost lost. Running the salon was harder than I expected, but in the best way possible. I worked long hours, managed employees, dealt with suppliers, handled the business side of things that I had never learned before. But it was mine. Every decision was mine. Every success was mine. Every challenge was an opportunity to prove to myself how strong I really was. I hired 3 other makeup artists, all of them talented women who reminded me of my younger self. I created a space where they could learn and grow and develop their own styles without being controlled or limited. I paid them well, treated them with respect, and encouraged them to dream big. As the months passed, Phoenix Rising became more than just a salon. It became a community. Women would come in not just for makeup, but for conversation, for support, for a place where they felt valued. I heard stories from customers about their own struggles, their own battles with betrayal or loss or self-doubt. And I would share my story with them, hoping it would give them the courage to face their own challenges. Richard's trial happened 8 months after his arrest. I didn't attend, but Patricia kept me updated. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Dozens of witnesses testified about his crimes. The jury deliberated for less than a day before finding him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His assets were seized to repay the investors he had defrauded. The mansion I once lived in was sold at auction. His tech companies collapsed without him, and his reputation was destroyed completely. I felt no joy when I heard the verdict, but I felt justice. I felt closure. I felt like the universe had finally balanced the scales. A year after opening Phoenix Rising, I was sitting in my office late one evening, going over the books. The salon was profitable. We had a waiting list of clients. I had been featured in several beauty magazines. And most importantly, I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, honestly happy for the first time in over a decade. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer it. "Ruby," a familiar voice said. It was one of my old friends from beauty school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "I just wanted to tell you something," she said. "Seeing what you did, seeing how you stood up for yourself and rebuilt your life, it gave me the courage to leave my own bad situation. I was in a relationship with someone who was slowly destroying me, and I kept making excuses for him. But then I saw your story, and I realized that I deserved better. I left him last month, and I'm starting over. And I wanted to thank you for showing me that it's possible." After we hung up, I sat in my office and cried. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of understanding that my pain had meaning, that my story could help others find their own strength. I started speaking at events for women's organizations, sharing my story and encouraging other women to never lose themselves in relationships, to never let anyone convince them that their dreams are less important, to always remember their own worth. I also started a small scholarship fund for young women attending beauty school who couldn't afford tuition. I remembered what it was like to struggle, to work 3 jobs just to pursue a dream, and I wanted to make it easier for the next generation. Looking back now, I can see how every painful moment led me to where I am today. Richard didn't break me. He revealed to me what I was capable of when I stopped accepting less than I deserved. His betrayal was a gift, though it took me a long time to see it that way. I learned that revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Real revenge is rebuilding yourself into something so beautiful, so strong, so successful that your betrayer's life becomes irrelevant to your happiness. Real revenge is proving that you never needed them in the first place. 2 years after opening Phoenix Rising, I was interviewed for a documentary about women entrepreneurs who had overcome adversity. At the end of the interview, the filmmaker asked me what advice I would give to women in similar situations. I thought about it for a moment, and then I said, "Don't wait for permission to live your life. Don't wait for someone else to believe in your dreams before you believe in them yourself. And if someone tries to make you smaller to make themselves feel bigger, run. Run fast and don't look back. Because you are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the hero of your own story. So act like it." Today, Phoenix Rising has 3 locations across Southern California. I published a book about my journey that became a bestseller. I travel around the country speaking to women about empowerment, financial independence, and the importance of never losing yourself in a relationship. And most importantly, when I look in the mirror now, I see the woman I was always meant to be. Strong, independent, unbreakable. A woman who knows her worth and refuses to settle for anything less. Richard is still in prison. He'll be there for many more years. I don't think about him often anymore. He's a chapter in my story, but he's not the whole book. He's not even the most important chapter. The most important chapter is the one I'm writing right now. The one where I wake up every morning in my own apartment that I paid for with money I earned. Where I go to work at a business I built from nothing. Where I'm surrounded by women I've mentored who are now building their own dreams. Where I'm teaching young girls that they are capable of anything they set their minds to. So if you're out there right now feeling invisible, feeling trapped, feeling like you've lost yourself in someone else's vision of who you should be, I want you to hear this. You are stronger than you know. You are more capable than you realize. And you deserve so much more than you're settling for. Don't wait for someone else to save you.